it's a travesty. And I don't like how it's being handled.
So, okay, the next question then. If you were in charge of the IFBB Pro League, what would you change to improve that system? You mentioned some things, but like to make bodybuilding more mainstream, to increase the crowd size, to increase the environment at these shows, what were some changes you would make?
Well, first you got to make it more affordable, um, and you've got to mandate the venues be better. I think you need to reduce the number of contests, make them make them special,
Yeah.
and you've got to increase the prize money. I don't know how much the sponsors are paying, but I think uh, they're making a huge contribution, at least to the prize money. So they just got to be better produced, not so cookie cutter. My primary scout,
Yeah.
and he brought Lee over to my office, and because Lee had told him that he was basically stranded in L.A. Lou Zwick, kind of a notorious promoter
Yes.
back in the day,
Muscle mania.
I had encouraged Lee to put his plane ticket on his uncle's credit card and come to America, and he would help him, with his career. Lee
Yeah.
did that, but then when he showed up in L.A., Lou was nowhere to be found, and he was, basically had very little, resources and was stranded. So, he was phenomenal. He's 5'3". He probably weighed about 215 pounds, maybe looking the best he'd ever
Wow.
looked, and he wasn't even 21.
I kind of want to have you on the show because there's a lot of people that watch my show that are in the 18 to 25 age range, and
Mhm.
they don't know who Ed Connors is. They don't know the history. So I'm trying to bring more of that back into the viewership here.
That's the reason I wrote the book, because I think it's important to know the history, because it's kind of being repeated right now again. Before the pandemic, I would not have advised anybody to open a gym because it was just too
Yeah.
cluttered a market. But now, the pandemic has changed everything, and it's the smaller gyms that I have a better chance of surviving. The big box gyms are really in trouble. I just got back from Washington, D.C. In fact, I spent last night at the DFW airport in Dallas, Fort Worth. Uh, so I'm a
Yeah.
little bit shell shocked right now, but from the travel. But I met with 120 other gym owners. We were sort of petitioning the government not to shut down the gyms again in the event of another
Okay.
outbreak. I hear, people right now, you're hearing, people mentioning swine flu or bird flu, and I'm
Yes.
terrified that we're going to get shut down again. And we can't let that happen if it's not that big a deal. And I think, Matt, wouldn't you say that Canada actually didn't handle it very well?
No, it was really bad here. Well, I also had a question for you. He wanted me to ask you, why were you so willing to help so many people out? Because it's like what you did is incredible, first and foremost, in the amount of people you helped to change their life and their careers. What gave you the inspiration or the passion to do what you do?
Well, I mean, it's uh, so many people. In fact, John Cena uh, wrote. He did a beautiful forward for the book, but one of his lines, and one I hear often, is that Ed, you're one of a kind.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Muscle Discord. And we have a very, very special guest on the show, huge in the bodybuilding industry. For those who don't know, welcome to the show, Ed Connors.
Hello, Matt. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. Well, Ed, the way I do it is I jump right into the questions, and I have a lot of them for you. The vast experience you have in this industry is a lot. It's crazy what you've got to experience over the decades you've been involved in it. And so I'm going to go through my questions, and we'll start off with kind of the beginning of everything. Tell us what drew you into wanting to buy the first Gold's Gym. I think it was in Santa Monica back in 1979, if I'm correct.
Correct.
Right.
It was one of those fluke investments that I certainly didn't buy it to make money. I thought it would be fun. What had happened was I had met Pete Gronkowski in Florida when I was down there interviewing with Disney for Epcot, and I didn't like the weather in Orlando, and swore I didn't care what they would offer me, I wouldn't take a job. But I met Pete Gronkowski there, and at the time he was the biggest human being I'd ever seen. And I said, well, you belong in LA. And he said, oh, there's no way I could ever get out there. I don't have money. I'm going through a divorce. I don't even have a car. And I said, well, if I take the job out there, I'll get you out and you can see what you can do. And I did. And so the $186 plane ticket changed his life and my life and the lives of many others.
So the first location was in Santa Monica that you bought off an individual.
Right.
Who is that individual? Because no one really talks.
That was Ken Sprague. A lot of people don't really know the history. Another reason I wrote the book is that Joe Gold started Gold's Gym in 1965, but he owned it only for 5 years, and he
Yeah.
sold to someone who sold to someone who sold to Ken Sprague. And when Ken Sprague's wife died, I don't think he wanted to run the business anymore because she was doing all the work. He was involved in other things. So he offered, Pete found out about it and called me up and said, Ed, you want to buy into Gold's Gym? And I thought I'd be one of, a couple dozen shareholders.
Yeah.
And it turned out ultimately there were only 3 of us.
Yeah.
So it's, again, I think in anything in life, you've got to take risks. You throw caution to the wind and you do something that you're passionate about. And I was very passionate even then about the business because I had joined a gym when I was at UC Berkeley, and it was not a fun experience. I joined to lose weight for the Army, knowing I would be drafted for Vietnam. And I think in the back of my mind, I swore if I ever had a chance to change that, I would. And actually, I pioneered $19 memberships back in 1980. People think Planet Fitness is doing, created that, but that was a model we had back then. I mean, again, it was the equivalent of $54 in today's money, but it was still affordable because most gyms back then you were charged, you were looking at 500 or thousands of dollars for a membership. Well, I don't know whether it was, a year, 5-year, lifetime, who knew?
Yeah. So you bought the franchise, or you bought it wasn't a franchise at that point. You just bought the gym in 1979, and then we'll get into the details more. But after, I think, is it 1999 you sold the franchise, or was it 2000?
Well, we sold the first time in 1999, and then Pete, Tim, and I stayed on as shareholders, and I stayed on as a board member for 5 more years. And so we ultimately sold out in 2004. So we were owners for 25 years.
25 years. And do you mind if I ask what you sold the franchise for? If that's
We sold the company for about $44 million.
$44 million. And you split that with your partner, Tim, and
Pete Gronkowski was a majority
Pete.
partner. I own 25%.
Okay.
And Tim and his ex-wives own the remaining portion.
Well, that's I mean, it's quite the journey there, from taking it from just a small gym to over, I think, 600 now around the world. Can you tell me what the gym culture was like in the 80s and 90s, let's say, compared to now?
Well, the gym culture was so foreign that Arnold Schwarzenegger had to go from Graz, Austria to Venice, California to get a workout. I mean, you think about it. The gym that he encountered, the one that's in Pumping Iron, was only 4,200 square feet. So, but that was the Mecca. That was the ultimate gym. So it just shows you how rare that was. There was, and there were no bikes in the gym. There was all equipment designed by Joe Gold and made by George Popasek. It was a place most people wouldn't recognize.
Yes, and so now you're in Venice Beach. I've been to that gym many times, love it. The environment there, the way you feel in that gym is just on another level. And I just suggest anyone that, goes to California, go to Gold's Gym, Venice Beach, and experience that. Now, I know it's probably not the same as it was back in the day when you were running it. I haven't been there since the new ownership and all of the changes they've made, and they're charging the pros now, and you can't do photo shoots inside it like you used to do. I know back in the heyday, you used to not charge for photographers to come in there and do photo shoots, and that helped get the gym a lot of exposure. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit?
Well, we were very welcoming to photographers. Um, that was again, and as you said, the environment was entirely different than it is now. I mean, a lot of it has to do with change in society, how we listen to music, for example. I think it's funny the things you think about in writing a book that you don't consider before, and that was the dramatic change in how we listen to music. Back then, nobody had anything in their ear. Nowadays, everybody's in their own little world, on their headphone or earbuds, whatever. So it's a drastically different environment. You're not sharing the same sound, and I think that's huge. In fact, I encourage gym owners now to basically have music in there that everybody would enjoy listening to, and it creates kind of a common environment that they can share. I think that's one of the losses with all this technology.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I remember I used to train at a gym in Saskatoon called Mawson Health and Fitness, and every night at 10 p.m. they would have, we call it the power hour, and they'd blast the music really loud, right? And they warn everyone that at 10 p.m. it's going to get crazy in here. So definitely miss those days. Gyms will not do that now. It's just maybe a light background music they're playing, and that's it.
Well,
It's
you
very
make a
quiet.
good point that the music changed. That was probably one of the most common complaints I had to deal with my partners. I was involved in 34 separate Gold's gyms. Some of them were groups like the Gold's gyms in Portland. There were 9 gyms in that group, but they would call with that issue, or I would get complaints from members regarding the music being played. And so we actually varied the music during the day. The morning might be easy listening, whereas, as you said, the nighttime would be, heavy metal at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me too. So you're an architect by trade, and you designed a lot of these gyms. Are there any Gold's gyms in particular that you designed in a certain city, state?
Well, I'm very proud of, actually, I designed, I wasn't the architect of record, but I designed all the nightclubs in Portland.
Okay.
And the one downtown Portland, which is now a 24-hour fitness, is one of my favorites. It was a former screw factory, so it's got 35-foot ceilings, a giant gantry inside, and brick walls. And that's probably my favorite gym. The second one would be the former Gold Gym in San Francisco, which is still there at 1001 Brandon Street.
Okay.
It's again, it's about the same size as Gold Gym in Venice, but that one I'm very proud of. It's worn well.
Yep.
And I didn't play architect for our franchisees, but I would look over their plans and then I would mark them up and help them, because there's certain obviously logical things in designing a locker room that people don't think about who haven't done a lot of them.
Mhm.
So I would try and lay them out. So for instance, if you were going into the restroom just to use the toilet and wash your hands, you could get in and get out without going through the wet areas.
Yes.
Or you wouldn't go through the locker room because that would cut down on theft.
Yes.
I see so many gyms where the locker room is the first thing you enter. Well, if someone's just running in to use the toilet, you could easily, he sees that Rolex or wallet in the open locker and it's gone.
Yeah.
You can't have cameras in the restroom.
No.
So
No.
you need to make them more user friendly.
Yeah, the gym I'm going to right now, the way the locker room is set up is you walk in, and then right there is a bay of sinks in a narrow galley, right? And then it opens into the change room area. And so every time you're like, it's like a bowling pin match. Like you kind of get through all these people to get into it's just simple things like that make a huge
You go to
difference.
the gym that Steven Didacek and
West Coast Iron. I don't train there. It's a bit further from where I live. I just train at a gym that's near to me. It's called
I've known Ron Partlow a long time.
Yes, Ron, I worked with Ron at Mutant for 10 years, so we're very close. And West Coast Gym is basically the West Coast Mecca in Canada, I would call it, for
Mhm.
gyms here. So it's an
Well, that
awesome
became
gym.
the ultimate accolade for a gym to call themselves the Mecca, and I list some of those in my book. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, yeah, people use that. I know they use it all over the world. I think in Brazil,
Yeah.
there's one or something they do that over there. And uh, yeah, you guys really set the trend for the gym industry and or a pivotal role in what our gyms are today because they all took off from the Gold's Gym franchises and how gyms were run, the business model, from how to process gym memberships, the rates, how to run things inside the gym with photographers, all of that. Like you guys set the trend for that, and it's a pivotal thing. That's why I kind of want to have you on the show because there's a lot of people that watch my show that are in the 18 to 25 age range, and they don't
Mhm.
they don't know who Ed Connors is. They don't know the history. So I'm trying to bring more of that back into the viewership here.
That's the reason I wrote the book, because I think it's important to know the history, because it's kind of being repeated right now again. Before the pandemic, I would not have advised anybody to open a gym because it was just too
Yeah.
cluttered a market. But now, the pandemic has changed everything, and it's the smaller gyms that I have a better chance of surviving. The big box gyms are really in trouble. I just got back from Washington, D.C. In fact, I spent last night at the DFW airport in Dallas, Fort Worth. Uh, so I'm a
Yeah.
little bit shell shocked right now, but from the travel. But I met with 120 other gym owners. We were sort of petitioning the government not to shut down the gyms again in the event of another
Okay.
outbreak. I hear, people right now, you're hearing, people mentioning swine flu or bird flu, and I'm
Yes.
terrified that we're going to get shut down again. And we can't let that happen if it's not that big a deal. And I think, Matt, wouldn't you say that Canada actually didn't handle it very well?
No, it was really bad here. They locked down the gyms for quite a long time. I lived in a condo downtown before, and they locked that condo gym down for like almost 2 years, way after even the
Oh,
gym started to reopen, and they still kept the condo gym locked down. I'm like, what? Come
well,
on.
imagine you're a gym owner in Florida or
Yeah.
Texas, and you only close 4 months versus like you or the gyms you saw up there and the gyms that I was involved in were closed 26 months.
Yeah.
It makes an enormous difference. And I actually took with me to Washington. I took copies of two Wall Street Journal articles talking about how well Sweden had done with the pandemic by not shutting down. And I was kind of shocked some of the Congress people or their aides were not aware of that. So I actually felt I did some good.
Yeah.
Um, in Sweden, achieved herd immunity early, and I think their death was the number of deaths was actually below
Yeah.
um, average per 100,000
Yeah.
compared to other countries.
Yeah, I want to get into that near the end here because I know you were just in Washington, D.C., so I want to talk about some of the work you're doing over there. But I want to keep on track with more of the Gold's Gym side of things. And can you list off some of the bodybuilders that used to train back in the 80s and 90s? And when you were at the gym, were you training alongside these guys, or did you train at different hours? Like, how did that work with your role there?
Initially, I was actually I had a trainer actually,
Okay.
um, but when you're training, it's hard to train in your own gym
Yep.
because you either see
Everybody, you got to
things
talk to
that are
everybody.
wrong,
Everyone's,
you want to get corrected, or
yeah.
or you get bothered by people.
Yeah.
It's amazing how rude people can be.
Hmm.
Not intentionally, but
No.
it's amazing how they can bother you. In fact, that's I think how bodybuilders started wearing something in their ears.
Yes.
Back, I think it was Walkmans that it all started. Um, they would put headsets on so people wouldn't bother them,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I didn't ever do that, but yeah, people would come up to you and start talking. So no, well, this is something people don't really can't appreciate. But back then, the Gold's Gyms were having a lot of uh, Gold's Gym Classic competitions,
Okay.
which is basically a bodybuilding contest for men and women. And our uh, our owners would tell me about people they had met, like a Jay Cutler or Paul DeMeo, who had won those contests, they'd come out to LA to get photographed. Back then there was no social media. So if you wanted to get publicity or get well known or get photographed, you had to come to LA.
Yeah.
It's a shame, but the magazines didn't spend any money. They didn't send photographers out in the field or even to contests half the time. They kind of got lazy and cheap and just came down to the gym, which was, kind of unfortunate for the athletes, but great for Gold's Gym because we got all that free publicity by the photographers waiting for the talent to come to Southern California.
Yeah.
And they would often be photographed, wearing our clothing, which was a big business for us, a big deal.
Yeah, and that's kind of I wanted to jump into a little bit more. Like, what was your average day running the Gold's Gym franchise at its prime? Like, what did a day in a life look like for Ed Connors?
Well, I'd usually leave. I walked to work. I had all three of the homes I owned were within a less than a mile to the gym. In fact, the first house I bought was maybe 2 blocks away, small Venice blocks. But I'd leave the house at 7 and I'd probably come back at 7.
Yeah.
And maybe midday I would after lunch or instead of lunch, I would go biking on the beach for an hour.
Nice.
I love bicycle riding. I've been doing it my whole life.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to kind of clear your head and think about what you've seen or what's going on. But that was the beautiful thing about the business is that no 2 days were alike.
Yeah.
When I was working as an architect, you normally had, maybe 2 to 4 projects that you were working on. One might be, final phase or just starting, or another one would be under construction. So you kind of had a fairly decent agenda. But when I was part of Gold's Gym, I would make a to-do list every day of maybe 10 items on it. Some days I would get to maybe only the first one. Other days I might get all 10 done, but you never knew.
Yeah. That guys, I was just kind of interested in how you run your day when you're running such a massive franchise. Can you tell us about some of the athletes, you found or, kind of ran into before they were famous, and now after you kind of mentored them and brought them in as a house guest, etc., they became superstars in the industry?
Well, probably one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time was Lee Priest.
Okay. I just had Lee on the show.
That's 2 inches taller. He might have been Mr. Olympia easily. But he was training in the Gold's Gym in Venice, and Herb Gelb, the photographer, saw him, and like he did Herb was kind of my primary scout.
Yeah.
And he brought Lee over to my office, and because Lee had told him that he was basically stranded in LA. Lou Zwick, kind of a notorious promoter.
Yes.
Back in the day.
Muscle Mania.
I had encouraged Lee to put his plane ticket on his uncle's credit card and come to America, and he would help him, with his career. Lee did that, but then when he showed up in LA, Lou was nowhere to be found. And he was basically had very little resources and was stranded. So he was phenomenal. He's 5'3". He probably weighed about 215 pounds, maybe looking the best he'd ever looked, and he wasn't even 21.
Wow.
And so I took some Polaroids. We had a studio in the back of the office area that we had allowed Chris Lunn, one of Weider's photographers, to use. We basically gave him a dark room, and I took some pictures of Lee, some Polaroids, which are I think they're in his book that Lee just put out. I sent them to Joe. I FedExed them to Joe Weider, and then Joe called me, and a day or two later, and said, "Let's have lunch." So I took Lee up there, and then Joe agreed to give Lee a contract, but it took 5 months for the money to start flowing. And during that time, Lee stayed at my house and turned 21. Some of the other house, he met, while he was at my house, he met half a dozen other house guests. Jay Cutler was one of them.
Yeah.
Jay agrees with me that Lee is, was really a phenomenal talent.
Yeah.
So it was just basically, it's amazing how giving somebody a roof over their head and occasionally help with some supplements or food money could change a life. I mean, that really amazed me how much that, because getting out to LA was a big hurdle, and it's even bigger now, where you need if you're going out looking for an apartment, you need a couple of weeks typically, or you should take 2 weeks to find something good.
Yeah.
But during that time you're in a hotel, you're spending $100 a day at least, now hundreds of dollars, and you're having to eat out, and so it's not that easy. But that's the remarkable thing, is that you could change a life just by opening your doors to somebody. And my house was kind of a guru house, because the guys would meet other bodybuilders and share their stories, their dreams. And I think that also gave them faith in what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because you got to remember, this is the 80s. And in writing my book, I looked up a lot of stats. And back then, only 1 out of every 10 Americans had ever even been on a plane.
Yeah.
So most of the people that were house guests of mine, that was their first time on a plane. And back then that was kind of scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it's like, it's just, I always get a kick when people always say safe travels, because frankly, flying is about the safest thing, even though it can sometimes get hectic or crazy with delays.
Yeah.
It's still a very safe way to travel. But they were a lot of them were just terrified. And I got such a kick out of that. Here's a big bodybuilder that is afraid of flying.
Yeah, no, like you're pivotal into a lot of these bodybuilders' careers. I mean, Jay Cutler's was a house guest. I think Gunther was a house guest. John Cena. Like
I just posted on Instagram. I had I think I had 28 or 29 German house guests.
Yeah. Like,
And you name them, they're there. They were a lot of them didn't speak English, which is a big handicap these days for a lot of great bodybuilders I see online. I think there are more really good bodybuilders in Europe,
yeah.
Especially Spain or Italy or Czech Republic. I think there are more over there than in the US or Canada, but most of them don't speak English.
Well,
and that's a big hurdle.
You have Europe, you have the Middle East, Egypt as well. Like there's lots of talent coming out of the Middle East as well. But it's crazy how bodybuilding has expanded worldwide. And I had a friend of mine, a fellow mutant athlete, Klaus Reese, Danish bodybuilder, and he was a house. Yeah, so you remembered Klaus, and he was a house guest.
Klaus is hard to forget.
Yeah, the blonde hair Danish guy, awesome wrestler, super athletic.
Funny, he had written on his social media that his dream was to be photographed for a Weider magazine, and I took a look at him, and I knew Joe would love him, so I invited him over, and he was probably 18 or 19 then, and he had a phenomenal physique, and he's a really charming guy. His dad was a professional wrestler, which of course intrigued me, because there aren't many European wrestlers, and I thought, well, maybe he'd end up wanting to wrestle in America, but he's had an amazing career, and he's, I think he speaks 3 or 4 or 5 languages.
Yeah, super talented. Yeah,
he's married with a lovely wife and a son.
Yeah,
so he's living the dream, and he was. He stayed at my home several times. It was a very, very popular house guest. I was lucky back then. I often have 3 or 4. I had out in the desert area where Klaus stayed, I had 3 homes. I was flipping homes.
Okay.
And so 9 bedrooms is the way I looked at it. And so Klaus met a lot of people, and it seemed to be easier back then to get guys together who would then all get along.
Yeah.
Now, nowadays it just seems tougher to be able to achieve that kind of mix.
Well, Klaus had a question for you. He wanted me to ask you, why were you so willing to help so many people out? Because it's like what you did is incredible, first and foremost, in the amount of people you helped. It changed their life and their careers. What gave you the inspiration or the passion to do what you do?
Well, I mean, it's so many people. In fact, John Cena wrote, he did a beautiful foreword for the book, but one of his lines, and one I hear often, is that Ed, you're one of a kind. And I dedicate my book to my mother, Winnie, and she would so often say, there but for the grace of God go you or I, when she would see somebody less fortunate. And part of what I did was charity, just not expecting to be paid back. But the other was, it was fun to play God. Frankly, I was changing someone's life. There are many people. There are some people in my book. I list 537 house guests at the back of the book. Some of them I know, if they had never met me, their lives would be no different. But there's a certain group that I could say, if they'd never met me, they would not have had the careers they've had. And so it's amazing what you can do. And of course, then the third thing is that people seem to miss is that they helped make Gold's Gym the Mecca, the largest gym chain in the world. It wasn't all a one-way street in terms of charity, because they would do their photo shoots in the gym with the Gold's Gym, painted over them. You couldn't take a photograph in Gold's Gym Venice and not know where you were.
Yeah.
So that combined with the clothing gave us all that free publicity. And you'd appreciate this, Matt, because of your connection with the supplement industry. But a full page ad in a Weider magazine back then cost 35 grand.
Yep.
And if you picked up a typical Muscle Mag or Weider magazine, muscular development, whatever, Ironman, and you page through it, you would see maybe dozens of pages of photographs with Gold's Gym in them, and we didn't pay for any of that.
Yeah.
So that was huge. I mean, now I think Muscular Development came out with their last issue in December. There are no real magazines anymore. But back then, that was it. People would look at, people would get so excited each new issue that came out, as to who was in it, what was in it. I remember one of my favorite moments was going to checkout counter in a grocery store. And back then, Muscle Mag and Flex and Shape were up by the checkout counter. And my house guest would go with some groceries, buy a magazine, and of course, hope that the clerk noticed that was them on the cover.
That's funny.
That was a fun moment. People like Mike O'Hearn he and Craig Titus had 4 covers in 1 month, which is like winning the lottery.
Crazy. Yeah. Can you tell, what was the day in a life for a house guest? Like what did you provide? You provided, like, obviously a free place for them to stay.
Well,
what was
there was a very brief time when I actually cooked for them sometimes in the morning or evening, but that ended pretty quickly because eating out back then in LA was pretty affordable.
Yeah.
So I would leave the house at 7, they would have their day, and I'd come back at 7 and say, who's hungry? And I would take everybody to dinner somewhere in Santa Monica or Venice. And I would probably spend a couple hours, and I'd hear about their day. I might tell them about mine. Some of the people like John Cena have told me, you'll never believe how much I learned at those dinners, which is really flattering or nice to hear. But that was, I was gone for 12 hours and they did their thing. My house was right on the beach, or, within, the last one was right on the boardwalk. The others were not too far away, maybe a block or a few houses. So they would go to the beach and, ride their bikes along the beach, or go to the gym twice a day. I think people hung out at the gym because they didn't want to miss anything.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine, they might train in the morning, then go to the firehouse and eat and come back and just hang out because they were, that was the kind of place it was. You didn't want to miss anything.
Yeah. Is there any stories, any wild, crazy stories that, maybe you haven't talked about in other interviews you've done that stands out to you or have a fond memory of it? You've dealt with so many people. You must have some stories that you can only imagine.
Well, the barbarians were always characters.
Yes.
I'll never forget the day that they were fighting each other.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And one of them, I forget which one, broke the other one's window with his fist, right in the parking lot. And there were a lot of again, there seemed to be a lot more characters back then.
Yes.
Colorful people. They were two wonderful guys that had an amazing life just being the Barbarian Brothers. I think they each and at the end owned a home in Malibu,
Yeah.
and I still think their movies were great. I
Mhm.
would love to have gotten them in wrestling. I tried, but they weren't interested. They just wanted, and they never wanted to really compete because they didn't want to diet down. They
Yeah.
like being big. But they were we had a lot of different people like that just made the place a fun place to be.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about your interactions with Arnold and, his impact on the bodybuilding world obviously has been tremendous. Give me your thoughts on Arnold and his impact on the bodybuilding world.
Well, while I was traveling this past week, I finished reading his book, Be Useful, which I have right here.
Yes.
Um, and it's a wonderful read, by the way. And there's a lot in his book that I can relate to. But he's just an amazing individual. We always got along great with him. I really haven't spent any time with him in the last 10 years. The last interaction was when Joe Weider was dying,
Mhm.
and then I saw him quite often. But he's in another world. But I think Joe Weider combined with Arnold and Gold's Gym changed the culture regarding fitness, and I think that's a huge achievement. And in reading Arnold's book again this past week, I'm reminded of a lot of things he did. I mean, here's a guy that was, a bodybuilder and an incredible governor. And it's just a shame that he's, couldn't be running for president
Yeah.
right now, um, because he really was a leader and he cares about people. He talks about a lot at the end of his book about, you know, not living in a Me Too world, but a We Too world.
Mhm.
You're helping others. And, he says it makes him feel good, like it does me. And I felt good helping people, because I knew something. I mean, a lot of especially the foreign house guests, I mean, like Gunther Schlurkamp or Dennis Wolf, they were on the verge of quitting
Mhm.
bodybuilding. They didn't see a career, and because of what I knew and what I saw, I saw them having a great career in America, and both now are U.S. citizens. Uh, so that it's just, when you have knowledge, when you know a bigger picture, it's fun to share it. And I've been in the industry now 45 years. It's, June 16th will be the 44th anniversary of my opening the Gold's
Yeah.
Gym in San Francisco, which is still there. So it's been in continuous, it's no longer called the Gold's Gym, it's called the Fitness SF, but it's been in continuous operation for 44 years, except when it was shut down by the city for COVID.
Mhm.
And they actually had a large outdoor area during that time.
So, speaking of kind of crucial individuals in your life, are there any role models or mentors that you looked up to or that mentored you during your time running the franchise or even before that?
I didn't really have any mentors, and that's something I regret. I know that people hate the word life coach, I think, or they make fun of it. But I wish I'd had more of a life coach my whole life.
Yeah.
Or I had a few, but they died early,
Yeah.
or they died the timing was bad because I really, I would like to have had more people I could talk to about what I was doing. Um, I hired very good people who I think I listened to. We had a good consultants, outside consultants. Um, I still have the same accountant that I've had for since I moved to California.
Wow.
So we're talking, gosh, that was 1975. So almost 50 years
Yeah.
of the same professional. So I really wish I'd had more people in business, not who could have guided me, because part of it though is we were in a new area. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, branded T-shirts was somewhat novel back then. Now it's everywhere. The
Yeah.
supplement industry was in its infancy. I mean, that's one of my biggest regrets is how badly we failed at that. Um, we launched supplements at least a half a dozen different times,
Yeah.
Neil Spruce, who headed it at one point, left, and I mean, he ended up selling his company, I think, for 40 million. So he did incredibly well. So it just it's just a shame that people we didn't do some things like that because I didn't make the right connections. Like, well, if, a good example, something I really regret is the whole personal training world, the certification. It would have been great for Gold's Gym to be the head certifier. Who right now is certifying the certifiers? I mean, you know, some people can get a training degree, online overnight. Others, can spend weeks and, $1,000 getting the same thing or supposedly the same thing. So I think that's a whole world that, we could have we taken control of and done the industry some good.
Definitely. And I do agree about the personal training side of things. You definitely could have capitalized on that. But yeah, I was just interested to see if there's any role models that you had when you were coming up. Um, Next question, what's your current take on the current state of bodybuilding now? For example, the competitions nowadays, there's lower athlete turnout, there's lower spectator turnout. Nowadays, a lot of these shows, it's quiet in the audience. Back in the 60s and 70s, I mean, the audiences was jam-packed. They had horns, they were yelling, they were screaming.
Yeah.
It was a different environment. What do you think has changed?
Well, people have changed. The demographics have changed. Um, and I regret that. I miss that, but it just, it's a different world. It's like so many things. But part of it is just, I think, greed and stupidity, the way it's being handled. Uh, the shows have lost any kind of drama or showmanship. I went to a bodybuilding contest in Las Vegas last year. I forget what it was called, but it lasted, maybe an hour, but the tickets were $100.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the competition, I'd gone there because um, Alex Ardente, a really good photographer in LA, wanted me to find some talent he could photograph, and it would be a paid photo shoot.
Mm.
And I thought, again, I could help somebody by getting him two models, but
Mm.
there wasn't one person, male or female, that I could see in the contest in all the categories.
Yeah.
He didn't want anybody with ink. He didn't want any, he wanted a younger person. Um, I couldn't I couldn't find anyone, and the crowd was tiny. The venue was again a ballroom, which is I thought it was in the NPC rule book that you had to have a national level show in a rate auditorium, a
Yeah.
theater. So again, the drama's gone, the sight lines are terrible. Um, it's just a money machine where they're, back when Gold's Gym put on shows, we didn't even charge entry fees. Now it's $250,
Oh,
$300.
yeah.
And because so many competitors want to enter two or three categories, a promoter can easily take in 200 grand in entry fees before doing anything. There's no
Yeah.
incentive to sell tickets.
Yeah.
The ballroom space is probably free because it's against a room count. When Gold Gym had most of our conventions in Las Vegas,
Mm.
and as long as you can fill so many rooms, you'll get all that ballroom space for free.
Okay. Oh, I see.
I don't
Okay.
know if people realize that, but
No.
so yeah, it's a free venue, and they're it's a travesty, and I don't like how it's being handled.
So, okay, the next question then. If you were in charge of the IFBB Pro League, what would you change to improve that system? You mentioned some things, but like to make bodybuilding more mainstream, to increase the crowd size, to increase the environment at these shows, what were some changes you would make?
Well, first you got to make it more affordable, um, and you've got to mandate the venues be better. I think you need to reduce the number of contests, make them more, make them special,
Yeah.
and you've got to increase the prize money. I don't know how much the sponsors are paying, but I think they're making a huge contribution, at least to the prize money. So they just got to be better produced. not so cookie cutter.
Okay. That was another question. Do you think bodybuilders nowadays get paid enough?
Oh, pardon, Matt?
Do you think bodybuilders nowadays get paid enough?
Oh yeah, no, I don't think they're paid fairly. There should be more. Well, the prize money, I think, what is it? Is it 400,000 for the winner in the Olympia? What's second place? 200,000?
It's like 150, I think.
See, that's ridiculous. I mean, it should be the winner should get, maybe I don't, you work it out 300 grand, maybe the second is 200 and third is 100, but everybody should get some money. Nobody should walk away with less than 10 grand.
Yeah.
The fact that some of those top 10 people get no money, that's just obscene.
Yeah.
You got to be spread out more over all the category. And what and paying, I mean, no wonder Derek Lunsford switched categories because, well, 40,000 versus 400,
Yeah.
all just because he's short.
Hmm.
I think more Americans can relate to his height than the taller guy. The average American is 5'9".
Yep.
And it's interesting that people act like there's such a difference between 212 and open, but the first and second place winners are both from former 212
Yeah.
competitors. So it just shows you how they all should be equal. It's like, when I had this discussion with Joe Weider when he was alive, is that you can't pay the women less than the men. It's discrimination. And I think this and even you could argue even paying the guys less in physique or classic is also unfair. It ought to be, the money ought to be all the same in all the categories, even if it means less money for the Mr. Olympia.
Yeah.
I think Arnold always wanted to give more money, but the Weeders did not want him doing that because then it would upset the prize money at the Olympia. But now that Joe and Ben are dead, I think Arnold's doing whatever he wants, and he is raising the money in Columbus. So I think it's natural that it should go up in all the categories. But I'd also like him to make the prize money the same for all the categories.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the pushback on that from people when they hear that, should the bikini athletes get paid as much as the bodybuilders? And they say, well, no, because the bikini athletes don't attract as many, spectators to the show, etc. So why should they get paid as much as we do? And bodybuilding is what started this whole thing. So what's your take on that?
No, I agree with you. I just
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's tough to kind of break it down like that.
And if that's impossible, it's because there are too many categories for male and female. It just I mean, I can't describe to anybody when I'm asked what's the difference between figure fitness and wellness. I mean, how does all that happen?
It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. There's slight differences, muscle mass versus conditioning and all that stuff. But yeah, there's so many categories now that it does cost promoters a lot more to run a show and to pay out all these prize winnings to each of these athletes in each category. It's expanded. Before it was just bodybuilding. That's it. One category, bodybuilding. That's it. Now there's like 10, 15 categories, and that's a lot. So I can kind of see why promoters are maybe charging more because they have more to cover.
Then
But
there's the other ancillary charges which did not really exist. The tanning, I think the tanning now is up to $150, which started at 75. You got makeup and hair, and the women's suits and the jewelry now.
yeah,
Just more add-ons to make it. And again, if that motivates somebody, if somebody loves that and has something then to post on Instagram or whatever, God bless them. But to me, it's all gotten a little too crazy.
yeah. And I want to just kind of transition into the supplement industry. Do you think the supplement companies are paying these athletes enough? A lot of these supplement companies make 50, $100 million a year. And, is that being kind of transferred down to their athletes adequately?
Probably. I mean, they're all kind of crying poor now. But I'm still impressed with what an athlete can do in terms of endorsing a product. I mean, Chris Bumstead, look what he's done for the company in Florida. That's pretty amazing. I think, and I saw that at FIBO this year, the power of the right athlete with a brand. I think maybe that's one reason Gold's Gym failed, is we didn't have a spokesperson like that. Back then it would have been very helpful to have some top athletes promoting our supplements. But yeah, I think they're making a mistake by not doing that, because it's still the power of individuals and that they're following to move things. Look at what Sergey Constance did, or Callan von Moger at one point. Just the number of followers and what they were able to do for products. I think the supplement companies are missing something right now.
Okay, and then moving back into the gym industry a little bit here, what's your current take on the gym industry now versus, when you were in your prime running the Gold's Gym franchise? You got Planet Fitness, Good Life here up in Canada, LA Fitness. What's changed? Is it better or worse?
Well, the gyms are definitely in trouble because of COVID. I just left that meeting in Washington with their 120 gym owners, mostly gym owners, and the baby boomers are not going back in the same number, and yet the landlords are expecting the full rent. When the gyms reopened, they didn't reopen with the same number they had pre-pandemic, but the rent hadn't changed.
Yep.
So a lot of gyms in trouble right now. So that's why the smaller gyms are doing better, but even the ones that are surviving are raising their rates. On the plane ride back today, I just saw an announcement that Planet Fitness is going to raise their rates for the first time in their history. So they were the low cost leader, and now they're having to raise their rates because you just post COVID you can't operate if you can't afford to be open at those kind of rates because you've got the additional costs of cleaning, you've got fewer attendees. You've got to make the numbers work, and I think it's kind of, I'll go out on a limb here and say I think most of the gyms that are surviving right now have doubled their rates. So you're making the gym is somewhat unaffordable. It's a vicious circle. Studies have shown that the average American, anyway, thinks a gym membership over $25 is expensive, and yet 5% are willing to pay over $50 a month. But $50 a month is sort of the sweet spot right now. But that's a lot of money for people. So it's a very tough industry right now, very tough.
If you could run a gym right now, if you could get back into it, what would be some things that you would change or you would do?
Well, actually, I'm working on a new gym model, and I may be in the works right now of doing something in Las Vegas, but I would use more virtual reality, but it would be bricks and mortar. I would, because again, the millennials and Gen Z are different than the people that we had at Gold's Gym in the 80s and 90s. And I want to have a gym where you could go in, you wouldn't need to know how to do anything, and you could be educated and entertained working out using this technology. So it's now possible, and I think we're due for a totally new gym concept. And
That's kind of cool. I didn't even think about it now.
Imagine walking into a room like a holodeck room in Star Trek.
Yeah.
And you've got an instructor in front of you. It's a hologram. It's not a real person taking you through your work, your yoga or your stretching. I think that would draw in everybody and be less intimidating and more fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really innovative. I haven't really heard anyone talk about that. So this is, again, you're still kind of reinventing the wheel here in the fitness industry, and so I look forward to that when that comes out. If I can be involved in any way, let me know. Need an investor, I'll be in there because that sounds pretty cool, and would change the game.
I do hope I could live long enough. I just turned 79 last Monday.
Yeah.
And I hope I can live long enough to change the industry one more time.
Well, and that leads me to say you were in Washington, D.C. I know you were just at this fitness industry advocacy meeting. And how did you get involved in that? How did you get invited to come down to Washington, D.C. and speak with the policymakers, et cetera?
Well, the Health and Fitness Association Actually, it was formerly known as URSA, which is a kind of a stupid name. I'm so happy they've changed their name. It was International Health Racket and Sports Association.
Mm.
You know, I mean, racquetball went, out of fashion, many
Yeah.
years ago, many decades ago.
Yeah.
So they've got a great name now, and they asked people like me to come to Washington and sit down with people from Congress and talk to them about our business, because the gyms got hammered during the quarantine, during the shutdown. They did a terrible job at advocating their cause. They were silent. So I wanted to be outspoken, and I'm glad I went, because first off, it was my first time at my age, walking the congressional buildings on the Hill. So I got to see, and they're pretty grand. I mean, it was some, but I'm always impressed with the people I see working in government. As I met a lot of young people, and the age of the senators or congressmen and women,
Mm.
and I was very impressed with the intellect and the the civic duty that they see that they have, and they really seem to care about our cause.
Yeah.
And it helped, I think, that a lot of them, you forget how many people may have a Gold's Gym connection all these years. It's been exactly 20 years since I sold the business. Well, in that time, there were, nearly 500, 600, 700 Gold's Gyms worldwide with, in a year, you're talking 3,000 members. So 3 million members. So during all these past 20 years, millions of people have either worked for Gold's Gym or worked out at a Gold's Gym. So everybody I met with on the Hill had a Gold's Gym story to tell me. So
That's
that
cool.
was really, in fact, I ended up having people wanting photographs taken with me.
That's awesome. Yeah.
They could tell their dads, look who I ran into, because their dad was a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Again, but it just shows how the change element, nobody I saw or met was, quote, a bodybuilder. I mean, well, we were all bodybuilders, but they weren't competitive bodybuilders, but they respect, their father, their what these people may know because of their history. So it was a fascinating couple of days, frankly.
Yeah. And kind of wrap things up here. You have your book, The Three Musketeers. Are you working on any new books in the future here?
There's my book for your readers.
Yes.
But your listeners.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would love to write another book, but actually I just got word on Friday that my publisher has sold the theatrical rights to my book, or optioned them. So who knows, maybe if it's a success, on the screen,
Okay.
God knows where, I'll work on it. I do have more books in my head, believe me, especially after reading Arnold's book.
Well, so potentially what you could be saying is, could your book be turned into a movie, Netflix documentary or something? That would be huge.
I haven't seen the contract yet, but apparently they're thinking of it as a TV series.
Yeah.
Because I've always thought you could run like Cheers only in a gym. I've always thought you could have a long running TV show taped in a gym with all the characters.
Totally agree with that.
Bar, right?
Yeah, it would be funny. You'd have different type of characters in the gym and the staff, and it would be funny. It'd be hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ed, I mean, I really appreciate you taking the hour to speak with me and kind of give my viewers an insight into, a little bit of bodybuilding history and what your involvement has been in this industry. And it's been pivotal, as we can see, the people that you've worked with, what you've done for the fitness culture and the gym industry has been amazing. And I'm just so thankful for you to come on the show and take some time. And I hope to have you on back again.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in person, maybe at the Olympia, huh?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
All right.
Take care.
Okay, take care, Ed.
All the best.